Sometimes history doesn't announce itself with speeches or press conferences. Sometimes it lies silently on the ground. In the early hours before dawn, the images coming out of Niamey were hard to ignore. Bodies of armed assailants scattered across the tarmac, motorcycles abandoned in panic, military-grade weapons left behind. Among the attackers, authorities confirmed something that immediately changed the tone of the story. One of them was French. No speculation, no slogans. Just facts visible for anyone willing to look. This was not chaos. It was a message. Shortly after midnight, Niger's most sensitive site, the airbase near Niamey's International Airport, came under a coordinated assault by mercenaries, moving in darkness, headlights off, striking with precision. For decades, such attacks in the Sahel ended the same way: confusion, foreign advisors, and long explanations about instability that never seemed to improve. But this time the script did not hold. Within minutes, Niger's forces responded. The threat was contained. Order was restored before the sun rose. By morning, the country's leader, Ibrahim Traoré, stood at the scene himself, not behind a podium, not behind diplomats, but on the ground where the attack had failed. His presence sent a clear signal to soldiers, citizens, and observers abroad: the state was not shaken, and it was not retreating. For many Americans watching Africa from a distance, this moment raises uncomfortable questions. Who benefits when the Sahel remains unstable? Why do mercenaries keep appearing where foreign troops were recently expelled? And why are African nations from Niger to Burkina Faso now choosing direct defense partnerships instead of dependency? This story is not just about one night in Niamey. It is about a shifting balance of power across West Africa, one that echoes decisions made by leaders like Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso, where sovereignty and security are no longer negotiated quietly behind closed doors. So ask yourself, is Africa finally drawing its own red lines, and are Western audiences prepared to hear a version of African news that doesn't come with familiar excuses? Please share if you believe Africa has the right to defend itself on its own terms. Subscribe if you believe the truth matters more than the headlines. The attack began quietly, the way carefully planned operations often do, without sirens, without warnings, without headlines. At approximately 12:20 a.m., under the cover of darkness, a group of armed men approached Niamey's most sensitive military site, base Ariane 101, adjacent to the international airport. They did not arrive in armored vehicles or convoys. Instead, they came on motorcycles, moving fast, headlights switched off, blending into the night. This method was not accidental. In the Sahel, motorcycles are the signature of irregular warfare: cheap, fast, and difficult to track. It was a tactic designed to create confusion, exploit darkness, and strike before defenders could organize. Their target was symbolic as much as it was strategic. Base 101 is not just another military installation. It is the same site from which French forces were expelled in November 2023, following Niger's decision to end its long-standing military cooperation with Paris. Since then, the base has represented something new: a break from dependency and a reclaiming of national control. To attack it was to challenge that decision directly. According to Niger's Ministry of Defense, the assailants were mercenaries, not local insurgents acting spontaneously. They were described as teleguided, a phrase that carries weight in this region. It suggests coordination, financing, and direction from beyond Niger's borders. That suspicion deepened when authorities later confirmed that one of the attackers was French. The assault unfolded rapidly. Gunfire erupted around the perimeter. A stockpile of ammunition was hit and caught fire, sending flashes of light into the night sky. In their retreat, the attackers fired indiscriminately, striking 3 civilian aircraft, including 2 belonging to the ASCII airline, raising the risk of civilian casualties and transforming a military target into a broader threat to public safety. For roughly 30 minutes, the situation hung in the balance. This was the moment many Nigerians feared most, the kind of sudden, destabilizing attack that in the past spiraled into prolonged insecurity and foreign intervention. But this time, the response was different. Security forces at the base, reinforced immediately by defense units across the city, moved in coordinated fashion. Ground units and air defense elements worked together, sealing off escape routes and cutting the attackers off from civilian areas. Within 20 minutes, the momentum shifted decisively. Some of the assailants were neutralized on the spot. Others attempted to flee, abandoning their motorcycles and weapons in panic, only to be intercepted and stopped during their escape. By the time the gunfire ceased, 20 mercenaries lay dead and 11 others had been captured, most of them severely wounded. A significant cache of weapons and equipment was recovered, offering tangible proof that this had been a planned military operation, not a random act of violence. The cost, however, was not zero. 4 Nigerian soldiers were injured, and infrastructure damage was reported particularly near the ammunition storage area. These details were not hidden or minimized. They were acknowledged openly, reinforcing the credibility of the official account. As dawn approached, the immediate threat was over. The base remained under Nigerian control. Airspace security was restored. The city of Niamey, though shaken, was not paralyzed. Within hours, Ibrahim Traoré, President of the Republic and Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, arrived at the scene. His visit was brief but deliberate. He inspected the damage, reviewed the results of the response, and met directly with the forces who had repelled the attack. There were no long speeches, no theatrical gestures. The message was conveyed simply by presence. The state had been tested, and it had held. The turning point did not come with a dramatic announcement. It came with speed. Barely minutes after the first shots were fired, Niger's defense system shifted from alert to action. What had begun as a sudden infiltration attempt was now being met with a response that was both disciplined and coordinated. This was not the slow, fragmented reaction many in the region had grown used to over the years. This time, the command structure held. Ground units moved first, sealing the perimeter and preventing the attackers from spreading towards civilian areas. At the same time, aerial and air defense elements were activated, cutting off escape routes and denying the mercenaries the advantage of mobility they had counted on. The motorcycles that had brought them in, once symbols of speed and surprise, quickly became liabilities. According to military officials, the decisive phase lasted less than 20 minutes. Within that short window, the attackers' plan unraveled. Some were neutralized immediately as they attempted to push deeper into the base. Others, realizing the operation had failed, turned to flee. Panic replaced coordination. In the darkness, they abandoned weapons equipment and even wounded comrades in a desperate attempt to escape. It was during this chaotic retreat that the full strength of the response became visible. Security forces pursued with precision, not recklessness. The objective was clear: contain the threat completely. Several of the fleeing mercenaries were intercepted and neutralized on surrounding routes. By the time the gunfire faded, the outcome was unmistakable. The attackers were in full disarray and the base was secure. Crucially, Niger's forces were not acting alone. Military authorities openly acknowledged the role of Russian security partners who were responsible for a designated security sector and responded with what officials described as professional discipline. Their involvement was not framed as command or control, but as operational coordination, a distinction that matters deeply in a region long shaped by foreign dominance rather than partnership. This cooperation Niger's leadership emphasized was requested, not imposed. The results spoke clearly. 20 mercenaries were killed, 11 were captured, most suffering severe injuries that made escape impossible. A large quantity of military-grade weapons and multiple motorcycles were recovered intact, providing concrete evidence of the attackers' preparation and intent. These were not lightly armed militants. They were equipped for a serious assault. As news of the failed attack spread, attention quickly turned to the political message embedded in the response. Senior officials did not hide their anger. In unusually direct language, they warned the sponsors of the mercenaries that Niger was no longer a passive battlefield for proxy conflicts. Names were mentioned openly, an unmistakable break from the cautious diplomacy that had long characterized similar incidents. The message was blunt: those who believed Niger could be destabilized quietly had miscalculated. At the same time, authorities moved quickly to reassure the population. Security measures across Niamey were reinforced, checkpoints expanded, and patrols increased. Residents were urged to remain vigilant and to report suspicious behavior, but they were also told something just as important: the situation was under control. That reassurance was not merely verbal. Throughout the night, citizens of Niamey gathered near secured areas, offering support to soldiers and police. There was no mass panic, no rush to flee the city. Instead, there was a visible sense of solidarity between civilians and security forces, a moment that stood in sharp contrast to the fear-driven scenes that often follow attacks elsewhere. By sunrise, Niger's leadership framed the outcome in clear terms. This was not just a repelled assault, it was a statement of capacity. For years, the Sahel has been portrayed as a region permanently on the brink, dependent on foreign troops and external decision-makers. That narrative has justified endless interventions with little improvement in security. But in those 20 decisive minutes, Niger signaled that a different model was taking shape, one rooted in rapid response, controlled partnerships, and direct accountability. The attack had reached its climax, the response had answered it, and the implications would soon extend far beyond that single night. When the last shots faded and the smoke cleared, the most important question was no longer about the attackers. It was about what remained for the soldiers, the civilians, and the state itself. The immediate human cost was acknowledged without hesitation. 4 Nigerian soldiers were injured during the defense of the airbase. Their wounds were described as serious but non-fatal, and they were evacuated promptly for treatment. Military infrastructure suffered damage as well, including an ammunition stockpile that caught fire during the exchange. These facts were not buried or softened. They were stated plainly, a choice that reinforced the credibility of the government's account. By daylight, security across Niamey had been visibly reinforced. Patrols were increased, checkpoints expanded, and surveillance tightened around strategic sites. Flights resumed under heightened monitoring, and the airport, so often a symbol of vulnerability in conflict zones, returned to controlled operation. Daily life did not stop, but it moved with heightened awareness. Perhaps most striking was the behavior of the civilian population. Throughout the night, residents gathered near secured areas, bringing water, food, and words of encouragement to soldiers and police. There were no mass evacuations, no widespread panic. Instead, there was a quiet collective presence, citizens choosing to stand close to the institutions protecting them. For a country long portrayed as fragile, this moment of civic solidarity carried weight. Politically, the response was equally deliberate. At first light, Abdurrahman Tiani, President of the Republic and Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, arrived at the site of the attack. He walked the perimeter, reviewed the damage, and met directly with commanders and rank-and-file troops. The visit was not ceremonial. There were no lengthy speeches, no attempts to dramatize the event. His presence communicated something more powerful: continuity of authority. Shortly afterward, the Ministry of Defense issued a detailed communiqué signed by Salifu Modi, confirming the timeline, the casualties, and the results of the operation. The statement praised the courage and coordination of the defense forces, thanked the population of Niamey for their spontaneous support, and urged citizens to report any suspicious activity. The tone was firm but measured, assertive without being reckless. This balance mattered. For years, security crises in the Sahel often led to political paralysis, emergency decrees, or external mediation. This time, the institutions held. Civil authority remained visible. Military action stayed within a clear chain of command. The government did not ask for time to regain control, because control, it insisted, had never been lost. International observers took note. By addressing both the population and the outside world with transparency, Niger's leadership framed the event not as a national humiliation, but as a test passed under pressure. The attack, they argued, revealed vulnerabilities, but it also revealed capacity. It showed a state able to absorb a shock, protect civilians, and restore order without descending into chaos. For ordinary Nigerians, the aftermath carried a quieter meaning. Markets reopened, schools prepared to resume, families spoke not of fear but of resilience. The message circulating through the city was simple: the night had been dangerous, but the morning still belonged to them. In a region often defined by instability, that distinction is political power in its purest form. From Washington to European capitals, the events in Niamey were watched closely, even if official reactions remained cautious. For the United States, the failed attack touched a sensitive nerve in a region long framed as a front line of counterterrorism partnership and strategic competition. For decades, U.S. policy in the Sahel followed a familiar logic: stability would come through training programs, intelligence sharing, and forward military presence. Niger, in particular, had been considered a cornerstone of that approach. When that model fractured, many analysts predicted a vacuum, one that extremists or chaos would inevitably fill. The night of January 29th challenged that assumption. Here was a country that had expelled foreign troops, redefined its partnerships, and yet managed to repel a complex, coordinated attack on one of its most sensitive installations. Not perfectly, not without cost, but decisively. For American observers, especially those who remember past interventions from Vietnam to Iraq and Afghanistan, the scene raised an uncomfortable question: what if the old playbook was never the only option? Across Europe, the reaction was more restrained but no less revealing. The mention of a French national among the attackers, confirmed by Nigerian authorities, sparked unease rather than clarity. No government rushed to explain. No public accounting followed. Silence in this context spoke volumes. It underscored how deeply entangled the Sahel has become in layers of unofficial influence, private security networks, and proxy strategies that rarely appear in formal communiques. Beyond the Atlantic, other capitals drew different lessons. In Moscow, Beijing, and parts of the global south, the focus was less on ideology and more on outcomes. A state under attack had defended itself quickly, maintained civilian order, and communicated clearly. That mattered. It suggested that security partnerships based on invitation and defined roles rather than open-ended deployments could produce tangible results. This perspective connects directly to developments in neighboring Burkina Faso, where leaders like Ibrahim Traoré have openly rejected dependence on traditional Western security frameworks. The Sahel, once treated as a collection of fragile states, is increasingly presenting itself as a bloc, experimenting imperfectly but deliberately with new models of sovereignty. For American audiences, especially older viewers who lived through the Cold War, this moment may feel familiar. It echoes earlier periods when countries sought room to maneuver between great powers rather than align permanently with one camp. The difference today is speed. Decisions that once unfolded over decades are now tested overnight. The attack on Niamey's airbase was not a global turning point by itself, but it was a signal. It suggested that Africa's security debates are no longer confined to policy papers or conference rooms. They are being settled on the ground in real time with consequences that ripple outward. As Africa news continues to reach Western screens, the challenge for viewers in the United States and beyond is not simply to ask who intervened, but to ask who decided and on whose terms. Because the answers to those questions may shape the next chapter of global security far more than many expect. When dawn finally broke over Niamey, the story did not end with victory or relief. It ended with a warning. The attack had failed. The mercenaries were neutralized. Order was restored. But what lingered was not celebration, it was clarity. The events of that night exposed a reality many preferred to ignore. The struggle over Africa's security is entering a more direct and dangerous phase. Proxy actions, deniable actors, and silent sponsors are no longer operating in the shadows. They are being confronted openly. For Niger, the message was clear. The state would not collapse under pressure. It would respond, account for its losses, and move forward without theatrics. For its citizens, the night reinforced something equally important. The bond between public institutions and the people defending them still matters. That bond, once broken, is hard to repair. Once strengthened, it becomes a shield no foreign force can easily bypass. For the wider Sahel, this moment resonates beyond borders. From Burkina Faso to Mali, leaders are watching closely. The question is no longer whether outside powers will try to shape outcomes they always have. The question is whether African states will continue to accept instability as the price of assistance, or whether they will insist on defining security on their own terms. Figures like Ibrahim Traoré have already made their choice, not without controversy, not without risk, but with a clarity that reflects a broader shift across the continent. Sovereignty is no longer an abstract ideal, it is a daily practice tested in moments of crisis. For American viewers, especially those who have lived through decades of foreign interventions and their unintended consequences, this story invites reflection rather than judgment. What does stability really look like? Is it endless presence or accountable partnership? Is it imposed order or local control backed by public trust? Africa's future will not be decided in Washington, Paris, or Brussels alone. It will be decided in places like Niamey, Ouagadougou, and countless communities that rarely make headlines except when something goes wrong. That night in Niger reminds us that something different is taking shape. It may be imperfect, it may be contested, but it is unmistakably African in its direction. The warning is simple: ignore this shift and misunderstand the next crisis. The opportunity is just as clear: listen and perhaps learn. Please share if you believe Africa has the right to protect itself without permission. Subscribe if you believe honest Africa news matters more than inherited narratives. The conversation is only beginning.